it's my great pleasure to welcome you here today and also to introduce our fantastic panel. And this is the third in a series of Future Talk seminars that have been a collaboration between Clean Cut Fashion Association and Ethical Clothing Australia. And I want to begin by
dovresti averlo,
the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay all my respects to their elders, past and present. And we're going to have the absolute pleasure today of having our seminar moderated by the wonderful Clare Press. We're going to hear on our panel from the founder and creative director of Viktoria and Woods, Margie Woods, and the co-founder of Manning Cartell, Gabrielle Manning, and also environmentalist and model Laura Wells. And a little bit later, I'll give you a little bit more detail of our panel. But firstly, I want to tell you a bit about Clean Cut and Ethical Clothing Australia. Clean Cut was founded in 2014 by designers, industry experts and advocates, and is a non-profit association. Their core work includes consulting to brands and reviewing supply chains and business structures, offering advice about how to develop a sustainable and environmental practice. They also host events such as these, and they work to inspire and educate and work through collaboration. They're committed to addressing the future of fashion through responsible innovation in a fashion supply chain. They're working to connect Australia to the global sustainability fashion movement and are dedicated to supporting the industry through knowledge, awareness and support. They believe in the clean future of fashion, where fashion doesn't just look great, but is environmentally sustainable, socially aware and economically viable. Clean Cut's focus in 2017 is about transparency in supply chains, waste reduction and continuing the work with educational institutions and other organisations. Ethical Clothing Australia, the organisation I'm representing today, is a joint industry union body. It's a not-for-profit organisation which has been working to ensure an ethical Australian industry that ensures the fair treatment of workers in the supply chain for over 15 years. ECA manages a voluntary accreditation program which offers practical assistance to Australian businesses that are manufacturing locally. It ensures that their Australian supply chains are fully transparent and comply with all our local labour laws and health and safety standards. The ECA program maps a company's Australian supply chain through the entire cut, make and trim process. This is done partly through annual audits that are conducted by the Textile Clothing and Footwear Union of Australia, and also by encouraging companies to view supply chain management as a really integral part of their business. ECA protects both the rights of local factory workers but also home-based outworkers in our industry. We see our role as part of encouraging and developing a local industry through a collaborative approach and really pursuing an industry that is more responsible. We've got long-standing relationships with the industry and with local workers. And we see ECA as a really important and valuable resource for companies and businesses. ECA brands give credibility to the term ethical, because it's not just a claim that's made in isolation. It's actually a claim that is verified by rigorous third-party auditing of their supply chains. This gives consumers confidence. It means when a company is accredited with Ethical Clothing Australia, they know that that claim is one that is based on a real thorough investigation of that company's supply chain. Our list of accredited brands continues to grow, and you'll hear from some of them today, and it's a really positive indication that brands are starting to see the importance of having a great approach to supply chain management is not only good for their business and good for their ethics, but of course good for the future of the whole of our Australian industry. So this seminar series is called Future Talks. So I wanted to briefly talk to you about the future of our industry. I think it's something we all need to discuss and discuss more often. Fashion's future involves and is essential to its future, that involves both ethical labour standards and rigorous environmental sustainability. We need to embrace transparency. This is not something to be afraid of. We have the great opportunity here of linking local design and manufacturing here in Australia. The link between quality, great design, skilled manufacturing and durable fashion is critical. We've seen, partly as a result of globalisation over the last many decades, a move where there was a move to distance brands and designers from the people who are actually making their products. What we will hear about today, and what many of the brands that are accredited with ECA are doing, is turning that on its head and saying that the future of fashion is actually about embracing and respecting the labour behind the label, the workers who actually make the products. And of course, what we have to acknowledge about our future too is that we have increasingly educated, informed and mobilised consumers. There's great value in having an ethical supply chain, but there's also great value in local manufacturing and making. Here in Australia, we have the advantage of a strong regulatory system, where we have rights for both workers and unions that are enshrined in law, where you can, if you manufacture here, know the whole story of your supply chain and be confident about it, where you are able to control what's happening and the quality of the process in a much more hands-on, direct way, where you can have influence over delivery times, flexibility in terms of design and production runs, and responsiveness to consumers that is quick. It also allows for much greater customisation. So many companies and brands are increasingly becoming mobilised and interested in the morality and ethics of what they're doing. But even for those whose interest in this issue is only about the bottom line, an ethical approach to your supply chain is critical to managing risk. We all know the horror stories of our industry. We all know the damage that sweatshops and the difficult and horrific examples of workers who have lost lives in our industry simply sewing clothes around the world in the last few years does, the damage it does to the work that we do, let alone the human toll of that. So this is an important story, but it's an important story that is about, I suppose, two aspects. It's about valuing having a close relationship within supply chains. It's about brands acknowledging their responsibilities, but it's also about leading the way. Because this is about both the lives and dignity of people and human rights, but it's also about the future of our planet, the sustainability of our industry, of our environment, and of local employment. I really believe Australia can be a global leader. We can be a global leader in an ethical, clean, sustainable industry that is known globally for those characteristics, for those qualities. That will both help our market here in Australia and our market around the world. Known for the skills and the quality of the design and the manufacturing process. Known for our methods of sourcing and production that are sustainable, that recognise and that our planet deserves and needs care. These are the things that our industry, I believe, can be known for and increasingly is being known for. And today you're going to hear from some fantastic contributions of people who understand what that means, understand what that means in their own work, in their daily practice, in the efforts they've made in terms of the sustainability and environmental qualities of the products they're designing and making, of the work they do, who are active in campaigning and activism about this industry, about the planet, about the rights of workers. They are inspiring, and I am really looking forward to now introducing them to you. So our moderator today, on the far, from your direction, far left of our panel, is Clare Press. And Clare's a journalist, fashion editor, and eco-influencer. She spreads the word about ethical and sustainable fashion via her Wardrobe Crisis platform. Her latest book, Wardrobe Crisis, How We Went from Sunday Best to Fast Fashion, was named one of the Age's best books of 2016. She's also Marie Claire's fashion editor at large and writes the Sustainable Style column for Daily Life. Claire sits on the Australian Advisory Board of Fashion Revolution. And she tells me, when I asked for a secret, that she's also a tap dancer. So I'm going to then come back from Claire towards me, and next to Claire, we've got Margie Woods. Margie Woods is the founder and creative director of Viktoria and Woods, an Australian brand with simplicity at its core. Viktoria and Woods is predominantly and proudly made in Australia, and in addition to constructing garments in Australia, core fabrications including organic cottons and merino knitwear are knitted in Melbourne. They're accredited by Ethical Clothing Australia, and meaningful design continues to guide their design philosophy. Welcome, Margie. And then next to Margie, we have Laura. Laura Wells is an environmentalist, presenter, and one of Australia's top plus-size models. She holds degrees in both biology and law, and qualifications in environmental management systems. Laura's passion for the environment, love for the ocean, and interest in climate change has led her to become a positive role model, advocate, and ambassador for change. Welcome, Laura. And then last but not least, we have Gabrielle. Gabrielle, who I asked whether she liked to be called Gabrielle or something else, said not enough people call her Gabrielle. She's too often called Gab and Gabby, so we're going to be formal for this part of the introduction, and it's my great pleasure in introducing Gabrielle Manning, who's one of the three sisters behind independent Australian fashion brand Manning Cartell. Gabrielle and her sisters Vanessa and Cheryl co-founded the brand in 2005. They've got close relationships with the brand's local makers, as she believes this contributes to the quality of the end product. Manufactured predominantly in Australia, Manning Cartell source raw materials globally to cut and make here in Sydney, and are also accredited with Ethical Clothing Australia. So without any further ado, it's my great pleasure to hand you over to Clare Press, and I hope you enjoy the seminar.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those kind words, Michelle. I should just say that I'm not a tap dancer, but I always think if you forget what you're saying on a panel, that would be an awesome skill to have. Thank you to Clean Cut and to Ethical Clothing Australia for making this the third time that we've done these future talks possible at Fashion Week. It's just so rad to look around this room and see all these people who are engaged in these issues and want to come along and hear more about ethical and sustainable fashion. So thank you to every one of you for coming this morning. I'm going to dive straight into the questions, and I want to begin with Gabrielle, formerly Gabrielle. Gabrielle, you've been making your collections for Manning Cartell in Australia since you began in, was it 2004?
2005.
Five?
Yeah.
How important is that backstory to your customers? Because I know that they're very attracted to the beauty of the garments. I'm thinking of the velvet and the sequins that I last saw on the runway.
Yeah.
So they're beautiful. How much do the customers care about the story behind that beauty?
You know, I think when we first started in 2005, it probably wasn't as important to people, but in maybe the last 5 years, it's become a lot more important. I think when probably people were considering more about food and, you know, where their food was from and produced and what they were putting into their bodies and that type of thing. I feel like that was the first discussion that started occurring that we were feeling in our stores. And then when I suppose we started communicating more about it, because it was something we always did really. I don't think that we were that conscious of it. It was just in 2005, it was a journey we wanted to take, you know, and for us really having that hands-on approach was incredibly important to the whole design process. So for our customers, I think we've communicated it more to them, and then that's created the conversation in store to enable us to understand that it really does matter to them, particularly our VIPs who shop with us more frequently. You know, we get to talk to them a lot more, and I find that it's for a lot of them, it's a conscious decision about buying because we make in Australia and we have the ethical accreditation, and so I think it is becoming more and more important to people.
And how do you communicate that? I mean, you talked about food and about provenance, which we know is one of the kind of key tipping points that's happened with the food industry, that people are very conscious of the health behind the food that they're consuming. Like, is it safe? Has it been treated with chemicals? Where has it been made? When you flip that over to fashion, how do you communicate it? Because in food, it's labels. But how do you tell your customer where the clothes are made? Beyond...
apart from communicating in store, it's a really good topic for our girls to speak to people about, but we did create a label, I think it was a couple of years ago now, actually has the ethical accreditation, you know, logo, made in Australia, and, you know, has a little bit of a blurb on the back about craftsmanship, and so we try and, you know, utilise the swing tags for that.
And do people read them? I always want to know, like, is it like a lovely afterthought that when you get to the counter you find out, oh, actually, this has got an added bonus? Or is that actually driving sales?
Well, I think we attach it to the Manning Cartell swing tag, and we put it at the front.
Yeah.
So it's sort of the first thing they see when they're looking for the price. You know what I mean? So they look for the price and then they see that.
We're going to get onto price later and onto the true cost of a garment, and also onto how much the customer is willing to pay in terms of paying more for ethical production. But I want to just swing over to you, Margie, and ask you, before this panel we were speaking about how your customers react to the whole Made in Australia concept. How much of your collection is made locally?
Some collections, 100% of them, the collection is made here, and then there's a couple of collections where maybe 5 out of 150 garments might be made offshore, so it's predominantly Australian made.
And would you like to just share with the audience a little bit about the brand? What is it exactly that Viktoria and Woods specialises in and does?
Yeah, I think we're really about simple design. I think it started with just a basic wool garment, and
you started with one style of long line garment.
Yeah,
one long line cardi, right? Just one. Yeah. In how many colours?
I think about 3 or 4 colours. Yeah. So I think it was conceptualising in my head for about 2 years, and then finally I found someone who could help this idea come to life, and we sourced this amazing superfine merino wool, and it had to be the right weight, the right texture, the right everything for this garment to work, and went ahead, produced this a few samples in this one simple long line garment with no shape. It was just very simple, but it was really modern, and the quality was really beautiful, and went out to market with it with a suitcase, and the boutique market that I offered it to just loved it, loved it straight away the second I pulled it out of the suitcase, and yeah, and now my friends still have those garments today.
I always love those stories about designers with stuff in suitcases. That's how many young designers begin, isn't it? Like with one little bag of samples that they're schlepping around on the train and on the bus. How important was it for you at the beginning when you had that one vision of, okay, I can make this great cardigan and I can sell it? Yeah. How important was the making aspect of that to you and the Made in Australia? Did you just do it because it was easy, or did you think this matters? Part
of it was because my background was always with Australian made. Where I came from fashion was always Australian made.
And where was that?
Metallicus. I used to work for a company called Metallicus, and their entire line was Australian made. And so, yeah, I think that's all I knew. And I didn't have a very strong technical background at all. So being hands-on, part of the process and part of what I wanted to create, I don't think I could have done it any other way. Like, you know, my first sample came out with, you know, shape and whatever, and I'm like, that's not right. That's just not what I want. And, you know, it took about 4 or 5 goes, and it still happens today. Like, a toile might change into the final garment. It might go through 3 or 4 different toiles before I get that shape that I want, you know. So I think that's, yeah, it's always been part of what I do.
We're definitely going to get into later what the advantages are of local production, and it definitely comes down to the idea that you can communicate quickly and meaningfully face-to-face in some cases with your makers. But before we get there, I just want to follow on and pass this on to Laura and ask you. Now, Laura, how important is it to you when you're shopping where your clothes have been made and where these garments have been manufactured?
Yeah, that's something for me that has definitely changed in the last 5 years. Especially since I've been more involved in the conservation type work. Before that, I guess being younger and not having probably as much money or being a little bit more flexible, I didn't really think about it as such. But with the more education out there, I guess being more of a conscious consumer, I definitely have a look at where my garments are being made and what they're made from as well.
You said in the last 5 years, what flipped your thinking? Were you a fast fashion junkie?
What was that, sorry?
Were you a fast fashion junkie?
Yeah, definitely. I think that was a product of me being in the modelling industry and living in New York and having a fast-paced life as well. So I think getting more involved in conservation work and having that background as a biologist and really taking control of how I want my future to look meant that I needed to be responsible for my decisions and my actions. So for me, it's looking at what I'm purchasing, where it's made, what it's made from, how long it will last. All of those things come into my purchase.
And when did you make that connection between your passion for the environment and fashion? Because those things are linked, but the link is not immediately obvious to everyone.
Yeah, I guess I've been thrust into the fashion world for the last 10 years being a model, and yeah, I didn't think about it until probably halfway through, and have been modelling for all these brands overseas that I guess technically are fast fashion in a way, and it was just a little bit disappointing to me knowing that, you know, that's what I was obviously there selling as well, but knowing that, you know, the future that I want is not replicated in what I'm selling or what I'm buying. So it came to me and I kind of had that mental shift and went, oh, what am I doing? Pulling my hair out. So.
But what are those environmental connections? In what ways does fashion impact the planet, just briefly?
So we have a lot of issues with ocean and freshwater pollution through the dyeing process. We have air pollution as well. We have environmental degradation in terms of forestries, farming. We have pesticide and insecticide use. I think the cotton industry, non-organic cotton industry, uses 25% of the world's pesticides, and I think 10% of the world's insecticides. So, and that's just from the cotton industry itself. And then when we go to our synthetic fabrics, we're looking at oil, and that's a resource that it's non-renewable. We can't get that back. So as soon as we're putting that into our garment, and I think 3/4 of the world's garments are made from synthetic materials, we're not getting that back. So we really need to think about that. And for me, that's definitely a driver.
As they say on the red carpet, who are you wearing, Laura?
Well, right now, would you like me to tell you?
Yes.
I'm wearing a pair of pants that I bought at an op shop in New York about 7 years ago. My shoes have been resold, so I've had them for a really long time, probably like 10 years. My top I actually borrowed from a friend, and my jacket I repurposed from another friend. So today I am just all about the sustainability and ethical.
Kicking goals. I think it is actually a really reasonable thing to say, what are you wearing on a Fashion Week panel? I'm wearing a dress by Bianca Spender. That is an Australian brand that is Ethical Clothing Australia accredited. I wore this dress on Monday. I've now worn the same outfit to 1/5 of Fashion Week. And I did it on purpose because I was actually going to borrow another dress from Bianca, and then I thought, why am I doing that? I'm just feeding into this crazy obsession we have for newness, and there is a bit of me that's slightly embarrassed to be like, oh wow, the same dress. And then I thought, no, I'm not having it. I'm going to wear this dress again tomorrow.
Yeah, bravo.
Now, Margie, I presume that you are wearing Victoria Woods.
I am.
Good to know.
Actually, head to toe, even shoes, but these are not made in Australia, so yeah.
But actually, these are not made in Australia, is it? It's another thing that I want to sort of pick you up on that and say that we don't need to be perfect. This is a conversation about how we can understand the origins of what we buy, that we can ask more questions about the clothes that we wear and the clothes that we love. It's not about being 100% perfect. And I think it's good to admit it, you know. I think it helps the conversation to say that we're not always Right, I'm going to ask you guys where you failed later, but before I do that, I want to just dial back for you, Margie, and talk about that first long-line cardigan and about the fibre, because you worked with merino wool.
Yeah.
And talking about sustainability, wool is a sustainable fibre in that it is grown with sunlight and grass. Tell me a little bit about your appreciation for wool and why you want to work with it and continue to do so.
Yeah. You know, wool is such a beautiful product. Yeah. You know, you might throw away a synthetic top or a top that you might buy for $40, but I don't think you're ever going to throw away a beautiful wool garment. You know, like it breathes, it self-cleans, it's really got a beautiful hand feel. It's biodegradable, so it returns to the earth. You know, like there's so many amazing things about wool, and I feel good when I wear it, and I think our wearers do too. So it's become a really core product for us across every collection that we do. It's quite core to what we do.
How much do you look into the supply chains of your fabrics? I know that we're talking about supply chains for people and for making, but how much do you do in terms of digging into the backstory of where your fabrics are made?
Well, that's constantly evolving, but we work with a mill in Italy and in Germany who loves wool, like that's their passion, and they're very focused on sustainable farming and, you know, working with farmers who sustainably farm. They have sustainable farming methods. Sorry, mental block. And then we're very conscious about the supply that we're using.
And do you ask those questions?
We do actually, and maybe we didn't years ago, but we definitely do now. And now the more that we ask these questions, the more, like, they might not have the answer for us this time, but we're finding with every collection they actually come to us with information. So because we're asking, our suppliers are asking more. So it's just this kind of like ongoing thing, an evolving thing.
I want to just throw that to you, Gabrielle. How hard is it to find out answers to questions, both in terms of factory supply chains, but also fabric supply chains? And if there are any designers in the audience, perhaps younger designers, how hard is it to get that information out of suppliers?
Well, fabric, we haven't been down that path yet as far as our sourcing capabilities for the fabrics that we bring in throughout Europe and Japan. But for our local production here, which has really been, I think, our strength at this point, you know, you spoke about we're not perfect. We haven't got to that stage yet of fabric. But locally, it's very easy. We only have a handful of makers. Most of them are within a 10-kilometre radius of us, and I think, you know, the ECA are part of that accreditation process, so they go and check on all the factories and ensure that, you know, their workers are in the right conditions. So I think that it's easy for us locally, very easy, because we're very connected to it.
So you're based in Marrickville, and you told me before that your makers are in Marrickville.
Two of the key makers are in Marrickville.
Next door.
Yeah. Which is amazing.
Do you want to talk us through a little bit about your design process and exactly how it is you do what you do? Yeah. How do you begin? I know you like this word, the hand.
The hand, yes.
Phrase.
It begins with the fabric, of course. I mean, the beginning of the collection is created for us from the fabric. That's kind of the starting point and the inspiration, because colour and print is very important to Manning Cartell, as is texture. Then really it's a process of sketching, which I was saying to you the other day, we still do by hand, draping, you know, on the mannequins. We have 2 to 3 seamstresses in-house.
Your fit model is your sister?
Fit model's our sister. She has been the fit model since day one. So I think a big part of that is she likes to try the garments on because of the feeling you get. You know, when you put a garment on, it's different to maybe seeing it on a fit model. Like, that's just what works for us, you know what I mean? So it's a feeling, and then you can respond to that through, you know, changes to the design maybe, based on how it makes you feel. We have the 3 seamstresses in-house, so we can twile, we can, you know, part-way through a sample, if there's anything that we're feeling a bit uncomfortable with, we can change it very easily. So it's a very connected, hands-on approach.
How important is that connective element of what you do to local production? Because, I mean, I don't make clothes. I did once give it a bash, and I have to say it's pretty hard. Making clothes on the other side of the world makes that connection more difficult. What are the benefits to local production in terms of, beyond that connectivity, but in terms of speed, communication? Can you talk us through some of those benefits for local production?
Yeah, there's a number. I mean, speed is one thing. If we can try, say, a small run of limited edition pieces in our 8 stores, and if the customers respond well to it, we're able to then recut that quite quickly. We have a cutting room around the corner also in Marrickville, so you know, we might start with, if we want, 20 units, and then, you know, up to 100 units, depending kind of on the price point and the type of silhouette that it is. So speed.
And minimums, obviously. If you're producing offshore, then minimums are one of those barriers that younger designers find it harder to meet. But the benefits of producing locally are that those minimums can disappear. People will make small runs.
Absolutely.
How does it impact on waste? And I want to throw this back to you, Laura, because I love to talk about waste with Laura. But Margie, does it help? Yeah. Sorry. But Gabrielle, does it help when it comes to reducing waste to be able to produce smaller collections? Are you actually thinking about that in the design process in terms of reducing perhaps surplus?
We only order fabric for the minimum or what we need, and then really for us it's more about the quality, not the quantity, so we would rather have a small run that sells through in store than have, you know, loads of stock left over. Yeah, so really.
Are you thinking that you don't want stock left over because it's a waste of money, or are you also thinking you don't want stock left over because of waste and because of that problem that we know that fashion has a waste problem? I mean, I don't know if any of you have seen the ABC show that's screening at the moment, War on Waste, and seen that crazy pile of clothes that was erected in Martin Place in Sydney that represented how many garments Australians toss into landfill every 10 minutes. Pretty shocking. I'm sure we're not throwing Manning Cartell into landfill. But yeah, do you think about that when you're designing at that stage?
It's all those things, really. You know, waste. Of course, we don't want to be left with stock. We don't want to go on the vicious cycle of markdown either, you know, which seems to be a part of what's going on in the retail industry. But really, it is very much going back to, again, it's about quality and not quantity. So, you know, you'll hold on to a Manning Cartell piece for a lot longer. I've got pieces still in my wardrobe from when we first started, you know what I mean? So it is about quality, and you'll bring out those pieces again and again. Whereas I think fast fashion, more so, of course, you know, you get rid of it, recycle it a lot quicker.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly true that neither of our panelists design with disposability in mind. That's not your worldview. But I think it is interesting just to touch on this idea of waste. Laura, what happens to a garment when it ends up in landfill?
Yeah, so anything basically that ends up in landfill is never going to go away, and synthetic materials that obviously made from oil and made from plastics never disappear. They're around forever, and that's something that we really need to think about, because as soon as it goes to landfill, or anywhere really, it's never going away. And then that contributes to climate change and giving off greenhouse gases as well. So, yeah, once something's there, it's there forever.
And also the conditions in landfill are not the right conditions for biodegradability. So even if you're talking about something like wool or cotton, this stuff doesn't just break down like compost.
No, it can't. It doesn't have the right aerobic activity there for it to happen. And when we're looking at our garments, I think it's around 73 million tonnes of clothing go to landfill every year.
I haven't heard that. What is it,
73 million tonnes. And that represents around 5 to 10% of our landfill capacity, so of what it's taking up. And landfills worldwide are completely overrun. So by putting things in there that cannot be broken down or aren't being repurposed and are a waste of a resource that should be reused, we're really detrimenting ourselves and our future.
Laura, you and I have often discussed this idea of the fact that the world's environmental problems can seem so overwhelming. How do we solve them? We can't solve them in one day. And this idea that you might want to pick your passion point and say, this is the thing that I'm going to focus on. And that works across ethical and sustainable fashion. Perhaps it's about local production and caring for people in your supply chain. Perhaps it's about recycled materials. Laura, what's your passion point, and can you share a little bit about what makes you mad and what drives you in your campaigning work?
Sure. Well, my passion point is the ocean, and definitely been working in ocean conservation for the last 5 years, as well as modelling. And one thing that really grinds me is plastic consumption, especially single-use disposable plastics, so things like water bottles and cutlery and plastic bags and coffee cups. So for me, that's my driver, and that's what I focus on, not only in my own individual day-to-day life, but also educating others on how their little changes can really make a difference to not only themselves, but the future and everyone around them, and how if you change one little habit yourself, you don't have to go out and preach about it, but people notice, and you set a really good example for those around you. And it's just a principle that you can apply to any of your passion points. So it doesn't have to be ocean, and it doesn't have to be about plastic. It could be about sustainability and fashion in general, in terms of workers' rights, chemical dyes, environmental degradation, pesticides. You could focus on those, and the little changes you make there as an individual, as a company, as an organisation, can really go on to affect a lot of change elsewhere. And that's what we need, is behavioural change.
Laura, you work as a model, you're a presenter, you're a spokesperson for organisations such as Greenpeace, but you've also worked, I'm not going to say purely in design, but collaborating in the design space. And I'm talking about Cora, the swimwear line that do you design it? What do you do exactly with it?
Yeah, I work with an American swimwear company called Cora Swimwear, and we use the recycled plastic materials to make the swimwear. So the material itself is eco-nil, and it's made from recycled content, recycled fishing line that comes directly out of the ocean. So instead of using virgin plastics straight out of the ground to make this, we're using things that have already been brought up from the ground and reusing them in this purpose. So yeah, I work with them in a design sense, and I have a capsule collection with them, and we aim it at the curvier woman, so a size 12 up to a size 22, I think.
Can I just say that size 12 is not curvy? Just saying.
You can have curves at all sizes.
Oh, that's true.
So yeah, and I felt that's a space that I've obviously been working in for a long time as a plus size model, and it's definitely an area in terms of ethical and sustainable fashion that is lagging. There's not much to offer in that plus size world, and so for me, we've done our samples in Australia as well, and then it's locally made in the US where the company is based.
Can I just say that I write about a column about sustainable style, and the amount of people who've asked me to recommend great sustainable brands that cater to a broader size range, I cannot count them, so many. So if anyone is listening here who is in the design space, it's such an opportunity. Where are those labels? I want to see some. Anyway, Econil. So that's the fabric that is made from regenerated ocean, what do they call them? Ghost nets?
Ghost nets,
fishing nets that are discarded in the ocean. That's great stuff. Kelly Slater uses it in Outer Known. It's used in various other swimwear brands. However, is that not also contributing to the question of microplastics in the ocean?
Yes, definitely.
Yikes.
So microplastics are small pieces of plastic that are usually 5 millimetres and under that you can't usually see with the naked eye. And there's been research done in the last couple of years just out of Sydney Harbour by Professor Emma Johnson from UNSW, and they tested 27 sites within Sydney Harbour, the sediment, and within 100 mils of wet sediment, so think about, I guess, a glass of wine, there was between 60 and 100 pieces of plastic within those 100 mil sediments. So, and we're talking majority microfibres which were coming from washing our synthetic garments. So this is, all coming from our washing machines and clothing.
I don't know how you're going to answer this. That's why I'm asking it. So what do we do then? So you're using Econil in what you make, but we know that we have this microplastics issue as well.
Yeah.
How do we mitigate and balance these questions? And I want to throw this back to you guys too, but if we can't be perfect, what do we do, and how do you view that, Laura?
Yeah, for me it was a trade-off in terms of life cycle assessment. Looking at, okay, well, what's the difference between using virgin material, like these virgin synthetic materials, rather than a recycled content? And for me, the recycled content was a lot better. These garments were going to be made in these synthetic materials regardless. It's really hard to make a swimsuit out of something that isn't synthetic.
The crochet.
Yeah, well, we could do that, but doesn't fare too well when you're really trying to get active. So I've had many a boob-out accident in a crochet bikini. Doing a life cycle assessment and seeing how we can, what are the benefits of each. And then also, not just stopping there, looking at the end of life of our garments as well, because that's something that a lot of people don't think about. As soon as the product, from a company point of view, goes out, then, well, it's not my problem anymore. Well, actually it is, because you designed it. You should be looking at the entire life cycle, this whole circular economy, where it goes, what happens to it afterwards.
Design can save us. That's one of my favourite phrases. I just think it's really possible for us to change the way that we do this by flipping our thinking so that we're designing with ethical and sustainable production in mind at the beginning, rather than trying to catch up and fix it afterwards. Gabrielle, you're focused on the ethical side of fashion in this conversation and on people. I wonder if you might like to just share with us how your approach to that developed. When you began, those phrases weren't really in common parlance, right? But now we're all on about it.
Yeah.
Share with us a little bit how you approach it.
In the beginning for us it was really a natural part of our DNA. So, I mean, we grew up sewing, the three of us, so it was just probably a natural progression to have it in-house and to see the garments, you know, designed and made in front of us. I think one message I wanted to really get across today is that the beautiful thing about making locally is you are very connected to your product. You get to see every stage it goes through, and I think you can really value the people that are also helping to create it and bring it to life. You know, so but making locally, I think it enhances the end result because you can be flexible. I think I mentioned to you the other day, sometimes sampling is, you know, it's easy to make one sample perfectly, but then production fabric may come in and there could be, you know, a little bit less stretch in the bulk than there was in the sampling. You can adjust it when you make locally very easily, and having makers that are nearby. You know what I mean? You can respond.
Yeah. And that's actually a really vital piece of the waste puzzle as well, because if you're looking at much bigger scale production for some of the fast fashion giants, when garments come out and they're not quite right, where do they end up? Yeah. Incinerated. They don't actually end up being sent back and then modified. So I think that, again, design can save us.
Absolutely.
How has being Ethical Clothing Australia assisted your business? Like, what does it even mean? Why is it good for you in terms of doing good business?
Well, I think, as I mentioned to you before, in the early stages, it was just part of our DNA, really. And maybe about 5 years ago, it started to become a discussion point, more of a focus. And from memory, I think Ethical Clothing Australia approached us, and we just felt that, you know, it was the next step to maybe communicate that more. So we do that through our stores, and online we've started to try and share that message more on our website, and I think we can get a lot better at that and helping to communicate that a lot more.
I mean, the ECA is not for profit, so this isn't an ad for the ECA, but this is a good tool for brands to use in order to feel that they can rely on the truth of communicating that message about their supply chains. Do you think more brands should get down this avenue of accreditation?
Yeah, if you're Australian made, why not? They're there to support you, I think, and promote the local industry. And, you know, if we can promote the local industry, we can co-create more and it flourishes a lot more, and, you know, we're not losing our designers to other countries where they're producing more, so I think that's really important.
Margie, what's challenging about making locally?
You know, maybe the cost per garment, you know, the make cost per garment is a lot more expensive.
How much more?
I would say it's a lot more. Like, sometimes I look at our bombs where we create our...
At your
what we create our, like, costing sheets and, you know, every garment. And then I look at the labour cost of that quite simple garment, and it is quite high, you know. But then there's value in every other part of being locally produced, so everything kind of negates itself, I think, in some way. So we're happy with we're a middle market price. We're happy with where we sit in the market.
You're not in the race to the bottom at Viktoria and Woods, so it doesn't...
Sorry?
You're not in the race to the bottom.
No, Yeah, not at all. You know, we just want things that, you know, are cherished, last a lifetime, and we can do that here.
We talked about longevity. Talk to me a bit about that for your brand, because I know that's very core to what you do. You know, designing originally one garment shape, one simple classic cardigan, which I know you're still wearing.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that. So longevity and design.
Yeah, I think, you know, not every single piece in our collection, but a big percentage of our collections are always about, you know, not only functionality, but also about timelessness. And, you know, I think if I make a blazer, maybe I can hand that down to my daughter, or I can give it to my friend when I've got another one. You know, it just has multiple lives, and there's no need for it to ever go out of fashion. So that kind of shapes what we do and how we design and put collections together. There's always that timelessness in design. So fabric means a lot, the cut means a lot, the style means a lot, you know. So,
Gabrielle, I want to ask you about challenges of making locally. We did talk about this. There are challenges, not just cost. What else do you think makes it a little bit tricky? What do you have to navigate?
I actually, at this point, can't think of many challenges. Price, yes, but in all honesty, I couldn't tell you how much more it is because we don't make enough offshore to be able to compare. The only things that we do tend to make offshore are heavily embellished pieces, which we, you know, it's in Australia, the industry is reducing. It's very hard to get some of the techniques. So India is amazing for hand embellishment. So we tend to do pieces out of India that are hand embellished. But yes, I couldn't really tell you the difference in cost. I just hear that it is a lot more expensive here, and our margins are reduced.
That does sound to me like one of the challenges, though, is that we don't necessarily have the skills across every element of what we want to produce here. And by sending production offshore, we're reducing those possibilities. I think we did talk before about lack of machines, right?
Yeah. And pleaters, and, you know, the industry is reducing. So it is difficult to get things like, you know, techniques like pleating or laundries. So that is a challenge, for sure.
The fusing guy in Surrey Hills had been there for 25 or 27 years, I think. When his machine broke, it was more expensive to fix it than to just give up business. That is depressing, isn't it? But I don't want to leave us on a depressing note. I do think it's good to share those things, though, because we want to talk about what is the value of keeping production onshore, and why should we try to do that, and how can we try to do that? Margie, what do you think is valuable about keeping this stuff here?
I think I touched on it before. I just really think that, you know, if we don't produce here, we can't, you know, the creative industry, the design industry can't flourish really, because all our amazing designers or makers are going somewhere else. So it's like the arts, you know, you have to co-create, you have to do things around like-minded people, and we've got a really unique country with climate, everything. You know, what we create here is unique to us, so I think it's important.
I want to just come back to that idea of cost. Laura, as a shopper, as a model, are you willing to pay more for a garment if it's been made carefully and if there's transparency behind that supply chain and it's been communicated?
Definitely, and that's something that I, as I said, have changed in the last 5 years. Now I don't just look at the price tag, because I'm looking at how long am I going to have this piece for? Can I repair it if it needs mending? What is its backstory? What is its life cycle? Does the store have a recycling policy or a return policy? And you know, there are a lot of stores around, and you know, Patagonia, for one of them, they have their repair and mend, so you can send your garment back and they'll mend it for free and send it back to you. They've just opened that up here in Sydney, so there are different companies that are doing that, and that's definitely what I look to.
Amongst your peers, perhaps in the modelling industry, or perhaps amongst some of the younger girls that you do see coming through, do people really want to pay more? I feel like we often say that we want to pay more, but do people really want to do it when they get to the cash point?
I think no, not so much. But that is just a behavioural change, and that can change with great education and becoming a conscious consumer. I taught myself what I needed to know, I researched what I needed to know, and I looked to brands that were educating me. And that's what it's about, and that's how behavioural change starts, and that's how we get people to stop using plastic bags and coffee cups. It's the education and changing that behaviour, moving away from a convenient lifestyle to something that is more sustainable. And I know that word gets thrown around a lot, sustainability, but what it means is creating a future that is habitable for yourself, is healthy for yourself, is healthy for those around you and your future children and grandchildren. Because for me, I'm not prepared to go and leave a world behind for my kids and grandkids that is at the end of the day shit. I want to give them a place that I know that I've done everything I could to make it a better place, and everything within my power. So if that comes down to me consciously choosing and educating myself on what I'm putting on my butt today, then that's what I'm going to do.
Oh, Laura. You mentioned plastic bags. I'm actually going to throw that at you. What kind of packaging do you use in store?
Paper packaging, so it's, and our cords are cotton cords
are they?
as
Great.
well, and I'm pretty sure they're undyed cotton cords as well. So.
And what about you, Gabrielle?
Same, paper with cotton tape.
Right.
Yeah.
And how much do you worry about those small elements of your business? Because obviously when you're running a fashion business, you've got to think about the bottom line, marketing, getting the message out there, the next collection. Are you actually thinking, are my swing tags organic? Are my swing tags made from recycled card? Am I using those little plastic bits that stick them on? Do you think that stuff? Have you got time? And I'd like to know.
I think it's little steps, and the more we all talk about it, the more aware you become. But I think, for us, the part that you said something before about making locally and the positives and whatever, it's a lot easier to manage at this point for us and control and to be aware and to know, the transparency you were talking about. When you have a handful of makers here and you can go to their factories and, that they come in, it's this collaborative work style. And I think the shame would be if we lost that, because it is reducing, that the next generation of designers may not have the chance to actually do what we do, and have that connected approach to designing, because it does enhance the end result. It really does.
I think there's another point on that. What you were saying is, in terms of the tags and the cotton and everything, and that's becoming more aware to you. And I think that's something that we need to look at for designers is, you're not going to know everything, especially from an environmental standpoint straight away. You're there to design. From my perspective, then obviously, as much as we're educating the consumers, we're also educating the designers and the companies behind these designs. So as a consumer yourself, if you want to see something different and you want to see something more ethical or sustainable, then you're the one that needs to educate those guys, because they don't always know. And you can do that in a multitude of ways. And I think obviously voting with your wallet is one good way to do that. And contacting designers, asking them, or asking them what their design process is, or where they've manufactured, or what sort of materials they're using. And if they don't know, then help them to be educated and find out, and tell them that it's really important to you as a consumer of them and as someone that loves their brand, because that is how they're going to change. It does start from a bottom level.
What do you think the big challenges are? I'm going to ask you, Margie. What's the next big challenge for you in this area of ethics and sustainability? What would you like to improve on?
I guess just the transparency, and I think we can only do that with our partners, our supply chain partners, and the more we talk about it, the more they're coming to us with that information. So it's taking the pressure away from us in a way. So I think it's all happening, and it's all positive.
So more communication, that's cool. Yeah. What about you, Gabrielle? Where do you see, for you and for Manning Cartell, the next great challenge, something that you want to take as an opportunity and move towards?
I think fabric sourcing is a great opportunity for us. I feel like what we have going on here with the actual making is, we've done a great job of it, and I feel really confident with it. But the fabric side is a great opportunity for us for a next step. Yeah.
And are you seeing more of these conversations? Because I feel like I started talking about this stuff a few years ago. This Fashion Week has been the most sustainability-driven Fashion Week in terms of conversations I've had in 10 years. Everyone's on it. Everyone's like, ooh, ethical fashion. That's good stuff, right? Because if it becomes cool, then more people want to get on it, and then that's how we make change. That's a good thing. That's the power of the industry to make change. The model in the dress that's made of eco fabric, or the power of something on the runway that's actually shaking up the system of how we make things. Yeah. Laura, what do you think is the big frontier for you in terms of trying to be the change?
Setting an example, and as I said before, I guess advocating and educating others. I think we really need to understand that we're not just making a transaction, we're actually taking action every time we purchase something, and we need to empower ourselves with that. And for any new designers coming on board, I think it's really, really important for you to have a long-lasting legacy and a future that you give back, because as much as we can look at our bottom line, well, we need to look at a bottom line that's intangible as well, in terms of what we are leaving behind and what damage we're doing to our environment. And so that should be at the core of your business, as well as obviously your passion of creating something beautiful. Well, then leave something beautiful behind too, for other people to go forward.
And that was the most beautiful message to leave behind as we move on into our future of today. Thank you. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thanks, gang. What a panel. That was fantastic, very inspiring and interesting. And I love that take-home message about care about what's on your butt from Laura. But I really wanted to say to our panel, thank you very much for your contribution today. Gave me a really good insight into issues that I sort of spend every day of my life dealing with, but I felt like I learnt things. I felt like you were very honest and open, which is great. So often in this industry, I think people are sort of cautious about getting caught out or telling the sort of whole story. So you were disarmingly open and honest, which is really appreciated. Our moderator, Claire, did a great job drawing you out there, and really want to thank Claire, I want to thank Margie, I want to thank Laura, and I want to thank Gabrielle, and really would ask you firstly to join with me in thanking our wonderful panel. And I also want to thank all of the people that put the effort into putting on today. There's a great team at Ethical Clothing Australia and also at the Clean Cut Association. Amazing workers and activists who care about our industry, care about the workers who make our clothes, care about the planet that we all live in, and put extraordinary effort into what you've heard and seen today, but of course all the work that they do every day. It's been an honour for Ethical Clothing Australia to work with Clean Cut Association over the last few years. We look forward to more collaborations, so please join with me in thanking the people from both those organisations, but of course also the great team here, all the extraordinary behind the scenes in the dark people who made this happen so smoothly. Please, thank you very much. And we do just want to leave you with those great messages about the difference we can all make and the possibilities for our industry here in Australia and around the world. Please follow the organisations, be involved in the conversation, know that you can make a difference to the sort of industry we have and the sort of world we have. Have a great rest of your Fashion Week, and thanks very much to Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week Australia. Thanks.